And hello, everybody, and welcome to the Movie Pit Podcast. I am your host, Christian, and this is usually where I would say this is where we talk about all of the big breaking movie news items that have come out throughout the week. Also, talk about the movie trailers and movies coming out this weekend. But obviously, with the whole pandemic thing going on, there really is no movies coming out in theaters. Unless you're going to a drive-in that happens to be open. There's really no big movie trailers. The occasional movie trailer drops, but movie news is still going around. But I have missed the last couple of weeks. I apologize for that. I had this thing with my foot, and everything's fine now. I just needed a little bit of a break to to get recovered properly. And then, of course, everything with the pandemic, every now and then you need a break. And that's what I've been taking recently. But I'm back, and I'm here to give you guys a podcast. Obviously, this is not a regular movie news podcast. This is, of course, my segment, my feature segment here on the podcast called Monthly Rewind. I realize that I haven't done one for the month of May yet. I usually tend to record these a little earlier so that way I can just post them sometime within the month. I had not done that with May because of everything that was going on. So here I am recording it on the shadow of Release the Snyder Cut officially working. But let's just get right to it. Let's get on to the Monthly Rewind of May.
Now, shall we begin?
And here we go.
Let the games begin.
All right.
A new age has begun. An age of freedom.
This is Sparta!
Are you not entertained? Are you not entertained?
You had my curiosity. Now you have my attention.
Get to the chopper!
This is going to be quite a ride.
And in case you needed a reminder of what these podcasts are all about, this is basically where I look back at all the movies that I have watched. I'm doing a version of this on my WordPress account where it's basically from the past decade that just happened. But I went a little bit above and beyond on this part here for the podcast because I'm looking at movies that I've watched since 2000. So I'm looking at the movies that I've watched since 2000 all the way to 2018, obviously because we just went through 2019, although last year feels like so long ago. But this is where I kind of just, look back at those movies and, take a look at that list, see what movies still have an impact on me, see which movies I still like, and just briefly talk about them here on the podcast. Because, we got nothing else going on. And I just wanted to bring something new, something different, something else to the podcast besides movie news and the occasional review podcast for you guys. So let's just get right to it. No more wasting your time. Let's just jump right in to 2000. Again, these are all the movies for the month of May from 2000 to 2018. We're going to start off right at 2000 with Gladiator, which of course was directed by Ridley Scott, starring Russell Crowe. You also had Joaquin Phoenix in there, and arguably his first role. Signs was after this, so I can see why people would make the mistake of saying that Signs was his first movie, but no. Gladiator was his first movie, and of course he played one of the most despicable villains in movie history. Gladiator has been on TV a lot recently, and I've been catching myself watching just like chunks of it. I haven't sat down and watched the whole thing in a long time, and even when it's been on TV, I'm usually always watching chunks of it. So I've watched like the opening chunk, I watched some chunk from the middle, and then the other day I watched the ending of the movie. So I haven't sat down and watched the whole thing in one sitting, but it's still a movie that, sticks with us. I mean, I use, everyone uses "Are you not entertained?" In their daily lives. And I used that clip of it in our beginning of the podcast. So obviously Gladiator has had a very long standing history with movie fans, and there's a reason why people like it, because it's actually very good. It's a lot longer than you would remember it being, but it's still very, very good. So let's move on to 2001. 2001. I'm already losing track. I got two movies here. The first one is The Mummy Returns, which of course was the sequel to The Mummy that everyone really loved, and everyone loves these movies. I love these movies. Third one was okay. The third one's not that awesome. Mummy Returns though, solid sequel. Of course, they had the infamous, cheap-looking $2 effect that everyone kind of has dubbed it a little bit, of the Scorpion King, which is played by Dwayne Johnson, which apparently, in case you didn't know, was rushed, obviously, as you can very tell from the movie, because it was completed 8 days before the movie came out, which is saying something. And you can tell. It shows. It shows. So there's that. And of course, everyone remembers the kind of time travel aspect to it. Not time travel aspect, but the flashback aspect to it. Very good. Solid sequel. I dug it. A lot of people have dug it. And it's arguably the last good Mummy movie that has come out in some time. So the next movie in 2001 is A Knight's Tale. And I actually sat down. This one's been on TV a lot too recently. I sat down and watched this from beginning to end. And this is the first time I've done it in a very long time. And I forgot how good this is. Of course, it has Heath Ledger in there. He was known at that point for 10 Things I Hate About You and The Patriot, which was the movie with Mel Gibson where he played his son. And apparently it was The Patriot that got him this role. And I think, everyone remembers Heath Ledger from The Dark Knight. Everyone remembers Heath Ledger. When you say the name Heath Ledger, you think of two things. You think of Joker and you think of how young he died and the prospect of his career that he had in front of him. Of course, like I mentioned, The Patriot, 10 Things I Hate About You, which is, I think, the thing that got him established here in the States. You have this, you have A Knight's Tale, you have Brokeback Mountain, and you just, and you have not a lot of stuff from Heath Ledger. And I mean, he obviously would have had a tremendous career ahead of him if he hadn't sadly passed away after filming The Dark Knight. But you look back at this and you look back at A Knight's Tale, you can see everyone when they say Heath Ledger, they go immediately to the Joker. But when I think of Heath Ledger, I think of the Joker. I also think of A Knight's Tale. I think A Knight's Tale is probably my favorite thing that he's done besides the Joker. I know it's very, not a big, a wide selection of his stuff, but I would say A Knight's Tale is right there. And I really love A Knight's Tale. A Knight's Tale, it's set in the medieval times, but it has this modern music to it. And that was a directorial choice by the director of the movie, Brian Hedgelin, who went on to work with Heath Ledger afterwards, and Shannon Sosman, who was also in the movie, and Mark Addy as well. There was a movie called The Order, which everyone pretty much forgets about and probably no one saw because admittedly it's not very good. But Brian Hedgelin went on to direct Legend with Tom Hardy, where he plays the twin brothers. But it was a directorial choice, and I think that was one of the first movies I remember vividly watching in a hotel room and hearing the modern or somewhat modern day music and really digging it. It wasn't one of those things where it was like, this is a medieval movie, we should have, medieval sounding music and scores. But no, this movie uses these modern day classics, or, at that point, modern day classics, very, very well. So if you haven't seen A Knight's Tale, or you haven't seen it in a long time, I highly recommend A Knight's Tale. It's very, very good. So let's move on to 2002. I have two movies here. The first one is Undercover Brother, which is a movie that I don't think a lot of people maybe saw or have forgotten about. It stars Eddie Griffin, who plays the title character, Undercover Brother, who was hired by a secret organization called the Brotherhood. This is basically a play on the blaxploitation movies, and you will find out why when I continue reading the kind of little synopsis here that I have. The Brotherhood is filled with all black agents and Neil Patrick Harris, who plays a character named Lance, to stop quote unquote the man, not Becky Lynch for all you wrestling fans, and his minion Mr. Feather, played by Chris Kattan, to stop them from derailing a black candidate's campaign, potential black candidate's presidential campaign. Like I mentioned, it's a play on the blaxploitation movies. It's an over-the-top action comedy movie. But oh my god, that I love this movie so much when I first watched it. And then I got it on DVD. I showed it to my friends. They loved it. And it became this little thing where every time we would get together, you're like, should we watch Undercover Brother? Like, yeah, let's watch Undercover Brother. And we would watch it. It's an over-the-top action comedy that is very, very good. And if you have not watched it, I highly recommend you do. It's one of those ridiculous over the top movies that I really love. I don't know what it was about the movie. I just really loved it. But the next movie, 2002, was of course Spider-Man. Sam Raimi directed Spider-Man movie, which has a very unique history. Obviously, if those of you don't remember, James Cameron was originally attached at one point, and he was going to make it a rated R Spider-Man movie with the blessing of Stan Lee. This is before the rights went to Sony Pictures and Stan Lee owned the rights to Spider-Man. He was going to have Arnold Schwarzenegger, who he had worked with at that point multiple times, to play Dr. Octopus. Edward Furlong was going to play Peter Parker Spider-Man during the first draft. And the second draft, he ended up casting someone older. He ended up casting Michael Biehn from Aliens, and he had worked with him on something else. Can't remember what else he worked with him on. Oh, the first Terminator. Then he was going to play Spider-Man. They were going to have a sex scene in the movie on top of the Brooklyn Bridge with Peter Parker and MJ. It was just this whole weird thing, this alternate universe where that Spider-Man movie existed. And then, of course, Sam Raimi came in, and we got what we know today. Raimi himself at that point was a big comic book collector, maybe still to this day, who knows. And the Green Goblin was originally going to be played by Billy Crudup before it went to William Dafoe, who had lobbied for the role after the script came to him. And Crudup at that point, who now we know Billy Crudup, if you need to face the name, he was Dr. Manhattan in the Watchmen movie. Of course, there's been a bunch of other stuff, but I figure I'd go for the one that everyone knows. So obviously, it went to William Dafoe, who was probably a better pick for Green Goblin, to be honest, at that point. And at that point, Crudup was only known for mainly, really, the big thing he was known for at that point, besides his independent movies, was Almost Famous. That was a big thing he was known for at that time. And of course, we got Tobey Maguire and Kirsten Dunst, and as the saying goes, the rest is history. I really liked the first Spider-Man movie at that point. And of course, that was that whole other big thing with the trailer. The first trailer for the Spider-Man movie had the Twin Towers in it. I mean, I think you could still find a version of it online somewhere. I'm pretty sure you can find it somewhere online. Yeah, the Twin Towers reflected in was it reflected in his eyes, or he caught two people and he used the webbing between, I can't remember what it was. I can't remember specifically what it was, but there's a thing there. The trailer was supposed to come out around that time, and obviously the Twin Towers went down before then and they couldn't use it. So they had to rip that from all the promotion and had to restart over. But Spider-Man to this day, especially the Tobey Maguire Spider-Man, holds a lot of people together. And it's one of those movies where, obviously we have Tom Holland now, we have Andrew Garfield. It's just one of those movies where, it's one of those movie series, I should say too, where everyone's just as like collectively came together and was like, no, this is our Spider-Man. This is the Spider-Man that we wanted. It's got the Raimi touch. It's got the feel of the Spider-Man that we all know from the comics. And that's it. And no one could take it away from us. And it's still to this day, no one can take it away from anybody. All right, let's move on. 2003, I got two movies here. I have, the first one is Matrix Reloaded, which this one, for me, I remember vividly. This is the first movie that I remember where there was so much hype around it. Like everywhere you went, there was, posters for it. There was trailers for it. I remember, this is back before, studios decided, let's just, release our trailers online, where they released the trailer on Entertainment Tonight. And it was one of those things where everyone, it was me and my brother at that point, we made sure that we were doing nothing at that point so we could watch the trailer on TV. For the first time, like the first time we were to watch that trailer was on TV. And of course, in Entertainment Tonight, they had that thing where, they start playing the trailer. It's like, yeah. And then they start talking over, which, pissed everyone off. But, I remember vividly, this is the first movie where there was so much hype for it. And I remember being involved in that hype for it. And then we watched the movie, and everyone, of course, has their, their opinions on it, and everyone is split on it. I really love the action of this movie. I think the action's amazing in this movie. From the fight, from the big fight with, all the fights really are amazing. But of course, the big highway chase scene as well. I know a lot of people are very split on the Matrix sequels. I think Reloaded is probably the better of the two, only because I don't really remember Revolutions that much, and I haven't seen it as much as I've seen Reloaded. So I probably have to go back and watch that. But there you go. The next movie on 2003 is, of course, X2, X-Men United. This one, another, kind of on the hype train as well. Everyone was really excited for this. They brought in a bigger cast. We saw the Brotherhood and the X-Men working together in this movie. There was that awesome opening scene of Nightcrawler, a fan favorite, finally being added to the mix. You have that awesome sequence of the mansion takeover and the fight between Wolverine and Lady Deathstrike. It was great. It's a great solid sequel. You had the tease of the Phoenix, which of course was ruined in X-Men Last Stand. But it's I remember X2 watching it in theaters and being so happy with it, and then being, slightly very disappointed by X-Men The Last Stand. But let's not talk about that. Although I think we will actually talk about that, because that also came out in May, and we'll talk about that fairly soon. Let's move on to 2004. I got two movies here. I have one I ended up seeing for a college assignment, but watching it, I immediately was drawn to it, and it's the movie A Day Without a Mexican. It's a movie. So the basis of the movie, as you can tell from the title, is one day, pretty much all the Mexicans that are living in the United States disappear, and they suddenly just disappear, and the economy kind of just shuts down. You're following these white families who have maids. You're following the fields of, the fields of where, all this fruit and vegetables are being planted and nothing's getting done. And it's one of these movies where it sticks with you, especially me, being, Hispanic, being born here in the country, but, being Hispanic regardless, and seeing kind of what that outcome is. And I think if I go back and look at it now, it would still hold a little true. What happens if all the Mexicans disappear? I don't know if the economy will shut down, but it would certainly take a hit because, obviously there's a lot of Hispanics working on shitty jobs that no one else wants to take. But it's just one of those movies that really just stuck with me even after I watched. And even though it was, it was an assignment, it was just one of those movies that just stuck with me and has stuck with me for a long time. So the next movie in 2004 is Troy. That is, of course, the movie with Brad Pitt, Eric Bana, Orlando Bloom, Diane Kruger, just Brian Cox is in there as well, Rose Byrne. You just have a bunch of people, and it's, of course, the story of the invasion of Troy. That was I remember watching it in theaters, and I think this was the first movie that I remember seeing in Dolby. And at that point, it wasn't the Dolby that we know today. It was one of those theaters where it's like, you only have like one theater, and there's only one showing of Dolby sound, and that was Troy. But looking back at it now, it's like I don't really remember that much. But I've watched it more than a few times all the way through on several occasions after that, and I just really love it. It's one of those movies. It's also one of the rare movies where Sean Bean does not die in the movie. So if you want that experience of watching a movie with Sean Bean in it and he doesn't die, Troy's for you. I know that's a spoiler, but it's just one of those rare occasions. So Troy, I highly recommend Troy. 2005, I only have one movie, and this is kind of a cheat because the version that came out in 2005 was not the version that I like, and that is Kingdom of Heaven, directed by Ridley Scott. Stars Orlando Bloom. There's a bunch of people in there. I can't remember any of them. Eva Green's in there, but Kingdom of Heaven suffers from studio interference, and there's a reason I mentioned the Snyder Cut at the beginning of this recording, because Kingdom of Heaven is one of those movies that is better, that the director's cut of the movie is better than the theater cut that we got, because the director's cut the director's cut's it's like over 3 hours long. And I never watched the theater cut. I knew the theater cut was not a good cut. I have heard I remember hearing at that point that the theater cut was not good, but the director's cut is so much better. And it took me a while to watch the director's cut, and I finally watched it with my brother one day. We sat down and watched it, and we realized how long this movie was. And when we watched the movie, the director's cut, my brother had never seen the theater cut either, but he like me had heard that the director's cut was so much better. We sat down and we watched it, and we were like, what did they cut out? Because everything that's in the movie makes sense because of what is shown. So I'm really wondering, what did they cut out of the theater cut, besides probably over an hour of the movie, that makes this movie coherent? Because everything that happens in the director's cut makes total sense, with the exception of a few parts. Because there's a character that gets introduced, and there's a boat crash at one point, and then there's like 3 characters that just disappear, and you don't know what happens to them. You're just like, what happened? Did we miss something? No, we didn't miss anything. They disappear, and that you just have to take that for account. So if you're gonna watch Kingdom of Heaven, watch the director's cut, because it is so good. It's very long, but it is so worth it. I kind of want to watch the theater cut just to see what they cut and what's the difference, but after watching the director's cut, I don't think I want to watch the theater cut anymore. So there you go. Kingdom of Heaven. Go give it a watch. All right, let's move on to 2006. I talked about it. I mentioned it, and we're finally here. X-Men: The Last Stand. What a disappointment. This is a movie. I also remember being on board the hype train, because I watched the trailers. I was excited for it. It's like, yeah, we get Phoenix for the first time in a live action movie. We have Angel, the Juggernaut in there. You have Shadowcat in there. You have Kitty Pryde in there. You have all these characters that we were huge fans of, and we finally get to see, and then nothing. And then it's just a big old blob of a beast, obviously another big one, and then you get a big old blob of disappointment. It's not good. It's not a good movie. It's not well structured. When you look at the behind the scenes stuff of it, it was basically a last minute job. Bryan Singer had backed out because he went to go do Superman Returns, and he took James Marsden with him, which is why Cyclops gets killed off in the movie, because he went with Bryan Singer to go do Superman Returns. I think Matthew Vaughn was at one point going to direct, and he was going to direct for a long time. Of course, he went on to direct First Class, but he was going to come on and direct this one, and then at the last minute, he kind of just backed out, or the studio kicked him out for some reason, and they brought in Brett Ratner because he was a studio guy. Brett Ratner is a complete studio guy, and he was like, yes, 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 and he just did all this stuff. And of course, the stories between him and Ellen Page at that point were not very pretty, that have come out since, and are still coming out about him in general. But it's one of those movies where you kind of just look at it, it's like, how did we get to that point? How did we get to a solid first X-Men movie, a awesome sequel in X-Men 2, to this, to bringing characters that fans love, like Beast, Phoenix, Kitty Pryde, Juggernaut, and of course everyone remembers the Juggernaut thing. And the Juggernaut thing, the Juggernaut line was not created from the movie. It was created from a fan dub in the movie, or online, and then Brett Ratner, of course, saw it and he added it into the movie.
I'm the Juggernaut, bitch!
How do you bring those characters in? How do you make a big deal of Angel, who I believe opened up the movie, and then have him show up only twice afterwards, and have him literally do nothing besides fly in once, and that's it. He's got like 4 scenes in the movie, and that's it. He doesn't do anything. He literally does nothing in the movie. And then you have Beast, who of course was played brilliantly by Kelsey Grammer. I don't know. It's not good. I don't want to talk about it anymore. Let's move on. 2007, I got 2 movies fairly quickly. I made a mistake on, I can't remember if it was April or another one, where I talked about 28 weeks later. It was actually 28 days later. I got my movies confused. Still stands, 28 weeks, 28 days, both very good movies, so there's that. 2007. The other one in 2007 was a movie called Severance. It's a movie. I remember specifically watching it, and it was the first movie that I can remember where it was my first dark humor comedy. It was the first movie that I remember being, okay, this is what dark humor is. And it's basically a movie where it's a company that sends their team out into the mountains for a team building exercise, and then they ended up getting hunted down one by one. It's the first movie that I remember specifically be like, okay, this is what a dark comedy is. And that's pretty much what it is. So it's called Severance. If you want to go check it out, go ahead. So let's move on to 2008. We got two movies here. The first one is, of course, Iron Man. It is the first movie of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, although at that point, we didn't know it was going to be a Marvel Cinematic Universe. I watched it again for the first time all the way through a couple weeks. I think it was a couple weeks ago, which I hadn't done in quite some time. And I forgot how good it was. I forgot how actually good it was. How, you're following this character, and I always forget that Jeff Bridges is in the movie, that he plays Obadiah Stane. He plays basically the villain of the movie. I always forget that he's always in it. The transformation, seeing the Tony Stark that we all know and love from, Infinity War and Endgame, and then seeing him in the first movie, he is a very different character. And Robert Downey Jr. was a little bit more, just a tiny bit more pudgy at that point. But I think you forget how good Iron Man is. I think if you go back and you watch it, you'll be surprised how good it is. So if you haven't watched it in a long time, go watch it. But the next movie on that list of 2008 is The Strangers. And I really, really enjoyed The Strangers. It was one of the movies, one of the rare movies that I went to go watch. It wasn't by myself. It was one of those rare movies that I went to go watch on a Friday night with one of my friends. It was packed. We barely got there on time, and we had to sit all the way up on the top. But we were sitting there, and it was one of those movies that really got to me. Because it's one of those movies where it can happen. It's not some, supernatural entity. It's not, Freddy, or it's not Jason, or it's not Michael Myers. It's one of those movies where you kind of watch it and you're like, this doesn't make me feel good. And it wasn't supposed to make you feel good, because obviously if you've seen the movie, you know what the ending is, and doing that and watching that and then having to go home and you're like, man, that is depressing. That is not what I want to feel watching a movie like this, but it is. And then you find out that there's an alternate ending to it, and it makes it even worse with the alternate ending. It's just, I don't know. But I really like it. It's one of those movies where it doesn't rely. It's a very quiet, quote unquote, quiet movie, because it's only a few people. It's a handful of people, and it's Liv Tyler, it's Scott Speedman, and then the three people who play the masked strangers, and one other guy, and that's it. And it's just one of those movies where it doesn't rely too much on jump scares. It's kind of this open space, like there's that, of course, that famous shot of Liv Tyler standing like in the kitchen, and then it's this wide angle shot, and you see everything behind her, and then you see the baghead stranger coming out from behind her, and she doesn't notice him. And it's just one of those shots. It's one of those unnerving shots that it's quiet. There's no music to it. It just happens in front of you. I really like The Strangers. I really do. It's just one of those movies where it's an unnerving horror movie that I feel that gets kind of a little crapped on because of the subject matter and maybe because of the ending. But when you look at it, it's just I don't know. I can't explain it, but I just really, really enjoy it. Not for the reasons of the material, but I kind of enjoy it for the filmmaking aspect of it. All right, let's move on. 2009. We have three movies here for you guys. The first one is, I want to mention this one, Terminator Salvation. I know Terminator Salvation gets a lot of crap on it. And as it should, because, we have this connotation that every Terminator movie that has come out after Terminator 2 is not good. And I agree. Terminator 3, not good. Terminator Salvation, in my opinion, one of the better sequels to come out after Terminator 2. Is it the best one? I don't know. I honestly can't tell you. But I kind of enjoyed it. And it's also one of those movies where the trailer was awesome, and then you have the movie, and the movie was it was okay. It wasn't awesome. It was one of those, this is a better trailer kind of bad movie. But I don't know. There's this thing where I can't hate it for some reason. I don't know. I don't know what it is. And of course, the infamous Christian Bale audio that came out from it. The next one I have for you guys is Up. Of course, that's the Pixar movie. Everyone fell in love with Up. I fell in love with Up. I don't think there's anything really bad I can say about Up except the fact that Pixar loves depressing the crap out of all of us. But there's that. And then there's Star Trek. The J.J. Abrams directed Star Trek movie. I know the movie gets crapped down by a lot of Trek fans and by a lot of people who feel that this isn't a good Star Trek movie, and that's your opinion. I personally really, really love this movie. I remember watching it for the first time in theaters and thinking, I'm really enjoying myself. I don't want this movie to be over. I really don't. And I went to go watch it a second time, and I had that same feeling. Every time it's on TV, if there's nothing else on and I got nothing else to catch up on, I'm pretty much putting it on there no matter where it is in the movie. I really like Star Trek. I love the cast. I think the cast is great. I like it, man. I'm maybe one of those rare people that like it, but I really do. All right. I got nothing for you for 2010 or 2011. Nothing that really stuck out to me anyway, too much. So let's move on to 2012, where I have 3 movies for you guys. The first one is a French movie called Sleepless Nights, or at least it was called Sleepless Night here in the States. The first time I saw this was at the Action Fest Film Festival, which is unfortunately no longer around. It was remade here in America called Sleepless with Jamie Foxx. Wasn't very good, but I really love this movie. I don't know how many people saw it. I don't know if a lot of people have seen it, but I really enjoyed Sleepless Night. It's a movie about a cop who's kind of blurs the line between good cop and bad cop, a dirty cop, I should say, who ends up stealing, who his partner, who is also like him, ends up stealing something that he wasn't supposed to during a job, and the bad guy, the villain of the movie, finds out who these guys are, and he kidnaps the main character's son and tells him to return his stuff to him at a nightclub. And then that's like the kind of, so our lead character ends up going to the club, and it's him trying to figure out what to do. It's him trying to find, save his son, but he also doesn't have all of the product that he stole, so he's just trying to play all the angles and all the sides. At the same time, there's an internal affairs officer on his tail that follows him to the club, and it's just the I want to say like the second half of the movie starts off at the club, and then it stays there. It doesn't leave the club at any point. So the majority of the movie takes place in this nightclub overnight. It's a very good movie. Thoroughly enjoyed it. If you have not watched it, I highly recommend you go watch it. It's Sleepless Night. At least that was the title here in the States. The next movie is Moonrise Kingdom. That, of course, was directed by Wes Anderson. From what I can remember, it is the first Wes Anderson movie that I watched. That I vividly remember watching. And it's the first, so I kind of declare it as the first Wes Anderson movie that I watched. And I fell in love with it, man. I guess I'm a Wes Anderson fan from that point, because I watched it. I really liked it. I knew that it was something different. I knew that it wasn't going to be for everybody, but I really loved it, man. I don't know what it was. Like, I really love it. It's about these 2 young kids who run away, and it basically, the whole town that they live in, the whole little weird quirky town that they live in, have to go find them, and they're all like in the woods somewhere. So it's very, very good. Obviously, if you're a Wes Anderson fan, or if you like his movies, or even if you tolerate his movies and you have not seen Moonrise Kingdom, I highly recommend you do. And the last movie in 2012 is, of course, The Avengers, the culmination of all the Marvel movies at that point: Iron Man, Incredible Hulk, Thor, Captain America. I really liked it. Obviously, it was one of the first movies I remember. At that point, I had seen midnight movies, but I think this was the first midnight movie that I watched where I remember there being an incredible crowd, because at that point there was midnight showings. There wasn't the 7 o'clock showings the day before. It was midnight. You had to go watch the movie at midnight. And I had gone to the midnight showing of Iron Man, of Captain America, of Thor, of The Incredible Hulk. But this was the first midnight movie that I went where there was crowds and there was more than one screening of it. And just sitting there, seeing all these characters together, seeing everyone enjoying the movie for what it was, and just having an awesome time. It was great. I remember watching that movie and sitting in that theater and everyone laughing, everyone cheering. It was awesome. And at that point, we didn't really know if this was going to continue. We didn't know that this was going to change the format of movies at that point. And it's still to this day, it's just one of those movies where you can pop in and you're like, yeah, I can see why this would change the format of movies for years to come, especially superhero movies. All right, let's move on to 2013. I only got one movie there for you guys, and that's Fast and the Furious 6. This is, of course, coming after Fast 5, which, kind of reinvigorated the franchise, kind of softly rebooted it. So you kind of know what to expect at this point. More over the top action than there already was, but this was really over the top action. This was the longest, quote unquote, the longest runway on the planet. You had Luke Evans as the villain here. You had the return of Michelle Rodriguez as Letty. You had Gina Carano in there. This was also one of those movies that I watched at midnight, and I remember sitting there in the crowd and everyone losing their goddamn mind for this movie, because it was just one of those movies. It's one of those film series that if you're a fan from the beginning and you're watching this now, like I was, and I can imagine, a good handful of people, maybe more than a good handful of people in there, they knew what these movies were about. They knew who these characters were. And, no matter how ridiculous this movie series gets, if you're a fan from the first movie, you know who these characters are. So you care about these characters in some way. They have become more indestructible. There's that, that very unrealistic scene where Dom basically captures Letty when she's flung from a tank, and he gets her and he lands on top of another car on a windshield, which really would have killed anyone, probably both of them, but they somehow still survive because he is Vin Diesel, or he is Dominic Toretto at this point, a Terminator probably that we don't know about. But I remember watching this movie in that midnight theater crowd, and it was, besides a superhero movie, this was the loudest I remember. This is the loudest I remember a crowd being for a movie that was not, a Marvel movie or anything like that. So that stuck with me. But even besides that, this is a very entertaining movie. This is a very entertaining movie, especially if you're a film fan, a fan of the film franchise, like I am. I'm a fan of these movies. I know how ridiculous they are, but I still, they're dumb fun movies. I like them. So get over it. So let's move on to 2014. I got 3 movies here. The first one is X-Men Days of Future Past, which of course was the movie where Bryan Singer came back, told that infamous story, that famous comic arc, where of course things were changed from the comic to the film adaptation, but that's always going to happen. I really liked it. I thought it was different. It wasn't the typical comic book movie that we all knew. I think maybe that's what kind of, for non-comic book fans kind of, probably didn't like it. But I appreciated that it wasn't the typical comic book movie that we all kind of knew. That story isn't necessarily action filled, from what I can remember. I haven't read it in a long time, so if I'm wrong about that, please forgive me. But I liked it. I like the more dramatic moments of the movie, which I didn't think I like. But then there was Godzilla that also came out that year, or that month I should say. And I know a lot of people were very, very split on Godzilla. I really liked Godzilla. I watched it in IMAX. This was also another midnight showing, or maybe 7 o'clock showing. I can't remember. It was a day before showing. Just put it that way. It was a day before showing. It was a night showing. Let's put it that way. It was a night showing, maybe 7 o'clock, maybe midnight. But I remember being in that movie theater. It was an IMAX, so maybe that played a factor into why I liked it so much. But I don't know. I know it gets a lot of crap. I know a lot of people have their problems with it. I enjoy it. I really enjoy it. And yeah, it does take a while for the movie to really, rev up and ramp up and be, the movie that everyone thought it would be. But I still enjoyed it. I really did. And finally, the last movie in 2014, probably arguably my standout for this month of that year, it's Chef, directed by Jon Favreau, who also stars in it. He plays a chef in LA who gets a bad review, and for whatever reason, that bad review kind of just sticks with him, and he kind of loses it. He loses his job, and he ends up starting a food truck with his son from his. I don't think they're together at that point. I think they're separated. Who's played by Sofia Vergara of all people, and he starts a food truck with his son and one of his best friends who also worked with him in the restaurant, and they start this food truck, and it goes off like gangbusters, and it's one of those movies where you think it's going to be something, but it's not. It's something else, and it's a really great movie. It's rated R mainly because of language. It's one of those movies where this is around the time where the rating system kind of came into question in Hollywood, because Chef was rated R only for language, which it had to be, because if you're in, even if whatever kitchen show you watch, there's always, foul language in it. And it was only rated R for that. And at that point, The Lone Ranger was rated PG-13, despite some stuff going on in the movie that could have lent it to be a rated R movie. And The Conjuring at that point was also rated R, despite not having any foul language, any gore. It was only rated R because it was deemed too scary by the MPAA. So Chef got rated R only because of its language. And I think maybe that kind of hurt its, kind of wide range of it. I think it's on Netflix. I know, kind of like a spin-off of the movie. It's not really a spin-off of a movie. It's Jon Favreau kind of took the concept of Chef and made the Chef Show for Netflix. I think he goes around and talks to different chefs and talks to different celebrities, and they make different things. I haven't watched it, but I know that that's a part of it. But the movie Chef is very, very good. It's a very good movie. It's one of those just regular movies. It's not, it doesn't try to be something different. It's not trying to say anything. It's just there to give you a good time. Don't watch it when you're hungry, because we made that mistake. My family and I made that mistake watching the movie while we were hungry. And as soon as the movie ended, we went right to the Lou Malnati's that was right next to it, because we were starving after watching that movie. So do not watch Chef while you're hungry. Okay, let's move on to 2015. Right? Yeah, I didn't skip a year. 2015. I only got one movie for you guys, and that is Mad Max Fury Road, which just celebrated its anniversary, obviously. And it is still, to this day, one of the best action movies I've ever seen. I remember watching this in theaters. I don't think it got as big of appreciation as it did in theaters as it should have. I know it found its audience way after. It didn't find its audience way after the fact, but it found its major audience afterwards. This is a movie that was awesome to watch on the big screen. I watched this movie at least maybe 4 times, maybe 3 or 4 times in theaters, and I just fell in love with it, man. I fell in love with the movie. I fell in love with the action. I fell in love with the score. It was a dangerous time for me to be on the road when that movie came out, because I would listen to the score of that movie and I would feel myself speeding a little more than I should have, and I shouldn't have done that. But it's great, man. I love this movie. I don't know what more I can say about this movie that hasn't already been said by everyone. So I'm just gonna say, if you haven't watched it yet for some reason, do yourself a favor and watch it. Watch it on the biggest screen that you have. Put that volume way up and just enjoy the hell out of it. So let's move on. 2016. I got two movies. I have The Nice Guys, which was directed by, why can't I remember his name? Shane Black. There you go. Shane Black, of course, stars Ryan Gosling and Russell Crowe. And just the chemistry between those two guys, watching this movie was awesome. It was great. It's a Shane Black movie. It really is. If you're not seeing a Shane Black movie, The Nice Guys was... If you want an experience to Shane Black, you can watch this, or you can watch Kiss Kiss Bang Bang, and they're both great. They're both awesome. I will admit that I actually haven't seen Kiss Kiss Bang Bang in a long time, so I can't really compare the two. But Shane Black has a knack for writing great character dialogue, and if there's a mixed match pair like Ryan Gosling and Russell Crowe, he makes it work. And he makes it work in this movie, and those guys are clearly having fun with it. And Gory Rice, who plays Ryan Gosling's daughter in the movie, she's a standout in the movie as well. So have at it, go watch it. The other movie in 2016 is Captain America: Civil War. I don't know what more I can say that hasn't already been said about this movie. It was on TV like last week, and I watched like the last half of it. It's still good, man. That airport scene is awesome. You know, you look back and everyone's like, oh, well, you know, it's not really a Civil War because they're just going to team up in the next movie. Yeah, okay, yeah, whatever. But it's still awesome to watch all these guys go at it. Come on. So yeah, it's, I like it. Go watch it. 2017, I don't really have anything. I do want to mention Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2, because I know a lot of people didn't like it. I know a lot of people think that it was a downgrade from the first movie. I get it. I do. I get it. It's not, I don't know if I would say it's better than the first movie. I don't think it is. I think it's a more personal movie than the first movie. But I can see why people have that problem with it. So I just wanted to give it a little mention. I don't dislike it. I don't think it's the worst movie in the MCU. Is it as good as the first movie? No, probably not. But I can see it. I can see it as a more personal movie, a more drama-filled movie than the first movie, for sure. So I just want to mention that. And then 2018, we have Deadpool 2, which again, fans are very split on it. Was it as good as the first one? I don't know. A lot of people didn't like the first one either. So this one was, it took its time to get really into it. And then you had Cable in there, played by Josh Brolin. You had Zazie Beetz playing Domino in there as well. You had the surprise cameo of the Juggernaut in there. I don't know. It's. I don't know how I feel about it. I still to this day don't know how I feel about it. It's not a bad movie, but it's not a good movie either. It's not even. It's a okay sequel as well. But the last movie, 2018, is Solo, a Star Wars story, which had its levity of problems before it even got to theaters. Obviously, Phil Lord and Chris Miller were hired. They were fired before filming was even completed, or like weeks before it was supposed to be completed. They brought in Ron Howard, who pretty much reshot almost a lot of the movie. And there was the story of Alden Ehrenreich, who played Han, that there was an acting coach brought in for him. There was just a bunch of other stuff that was done. Michael Kenneth Williams, who played the villain of the movie, couldn't come back for the reshoot, so they recasted him with Paul Bettany. There was just a bunch of stuff that the movie had before the movie came out, and then the movie came out, and I don't know if people didn't like it or if they did, or I can't remember what the reaction was. I know a lot of people have kind of softened up on it a little bit since it came out, but I don't know. I feel like it has waves. I feel like it has waves of being good, and then it has waves of where is this going, why is this happening, and then it gets to the end and you're like, okay, sure. It's an okay movie. I'm not hating on it. I did enjoy myself when I watched it, which is obviously is for me the more important thing about a movie. If you can have me enjoying your movie, then you're solid. You're good. You don't have to worry about me bashing your movie or saying anything too bad about it. But I did enjoy myself watching it. I'm not gonna lie. I did enjoy watching Solo. I didn't think I was gonna enjoy myself watching Solo, but I did. And I think that was probably the surprise to a lot of people too. I think a lot more people enjoyed it. I think the jury's still out on whether or not it's good or not, and whether or not they actually enjoyed it. Alden Ehrenreich did an okay job playing Han Solo. Obviously, how he got his name Han Solo was got a lot of people pissed off. But yeah, I don't know. And then you had the quote unquote twist at the end, which they may not go anywhere with in the film franchise, because it doesn't seem like it. The movie came out in 2018. There's been no talks about doing another Solo movie. So just have to wait. I mean, obviously you can watch probably Clone Wars for his story, but by his story I mean the person at the end. I think everyone knows the twist. Darth Maul appears at the end of Solo, but I don't know. It's the jury's still out for Solo, a Star Wars story for me. I enjoyed it. I probably have to go back. I haven't watched it honestly since it came out, just mainly because I haven't had any reason to. But I haven't watched it since it came out. I may have to go back and watch it just for the hell of it. So I don't know. We'll see. So that's it, guys. That's all the movies I have from May, from the month of May, from 2000 to 2018. That stood out to me or had an impression on me. Do you remember any of these movies? Do you remember where you were when you watched these movies? Do you still like these movies? Is the jury still out on some of these movies? Did you forget certain movies came out that year? Good, because that's what the series is all about. Remember the good old times when we watched movies that maybe, just maybe, we had forgotten about, and we watched movies in theaters and not at home, which I'm okay with, whatever, it's fine. So yeah, well, obviously, I'll continue doing this series. I really like doing this series. I really enjoy it. I hope you guys enjoy it as well. Obviously, we'll look at June next month, record that and release that, earlier in the month instead of, right before the end of the month, like this year's, like this month's. But yeah, thank you guys so much for listening and enjoying it. Obviously, everything that you guys need to follow me or, stalk me or whatever is down below in the description / show notes area. Links to Instagram, Twitter, the WordPress accounts. If you're listening to this on YouTube, you want to listen to us on your way to work or, while you're working out or whatever. We're also on Apple Podcasts and Stitcher. Links will be down below for that as well. If wherever you're listening to this, please like, subscribe, follow, whatever you need to click to continue following the podcast. If you are listening to this on Apple Podcasts, please leave me a rating and review. If you do, I'll give you a shout out on the podcast. That's the least I can do for you taking the time out of your day to review the podcast for me. But yeah, that's it, guys. That's all I got. Thank you guys so much for listening to the podcast this week. I know I've been slacking the podcast. I apologize for that. I will be making my return to to the weekly news podcasts. Granted, if there's anything really big we should talk about. So yeah, that's it. Thank you guys so much. Hopefully you guys have a great weekend. Have a great Memorial Day. Hopefully I get this out actually before Memorial Day. If not, then hopefully you had a great Memorial Day weekend. Please stay safe. Continue to stay safe. Even if your state is starting to open stuff up, like mine is. I live in Illinois. There's rumors that they're going to start opening up a lot more places at the end of the month. Please remember to stay safe. 6 feet apart. This thing isn't going to go away overnight. Just because things start opening up, it doesn't mean that it is completely safe. Please stay safe. Please follow the codes and everything that the CDC is giving us. Please continue to stay safe and be healthy, be happy. Things are starting to open up. Doesn't mean it's over. So just remember that. Okay, that's it. Thank you guys so much for listening, and I will see you guys next time.